confirming it got started. All right, this round can begin. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Kristen Stoichescu. I will be presiding this round. Plaintiff and defense attorneys are ready to proceed. We can start off with introductions.
Yes, Your Honor.
And before you begin, I have teams, it's 1065 v. 1248, yeah?
Yes, Your Honor.
I believe that is correct, yes.
Okay, great. So plaintiff's counsel, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, my name is Joshua Wagner, and along with my co-counsel, Victoria Hofflinger and Cameron Viss, we will be representing the plaintiff on behalf of the estates of Genesis Petrillo and pursuing negligence, per se.
Okay. And who do we have representing the defendant?
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Abigail Franke, and along with my co-counsel, Ms. Lexi O'Rourke.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
And Ms. Tatum Pike.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
We'll be representing the defendant in today's case, Peony Estates.
Okay. Before we begin, are there any pretrial matters to attend to?
None from the plaintiff, Your Honor.
Okay. Defense, anything before we get started?
Yes, Your Honor. First, I would like to invoke Rule 603, the constructive swearing in of all witnesses.
Okay, any objection to that, plaintiff?
No objection, Your Honor.
Okay.
And next, Your Honor, I would like to invoke Rule 615, the constructive sequestration of all witnesses.
Okay, and Mr. Wagner, I assume you have no objections to that either.
No objections, Your Honor.
Okay, motion is granted.
Next, Your Honor, am I right to assume that before this trial, you received documents containing the Midland Rules of Evidence, relevant case law, stipulations, and special instructions?
Yes.
Then at this time, Your Honor, we would like to tender those documents to the bench.
Okay, they are constructively tendered. Very good. Anything else?
Yes, Your Honor. Since this is our first time in your virtual courtroom, would you like us to screen share an exhibit when the foundation is being laid and it's being introduced, or only once it has been admitted?
We can go ahead and do the preliminary showing of screen sharing of the documents while you're laying the foundation. We'll just assume for the purposes of the whole trial that until the document is admitted, it's being viewed outside the presence of the jury.
Yes, Your Honor. Lastly, we would like to bring your attention to Stipulation 3, which states that Exhibits 1 through 10 have been pre-admitted in today's proceedings.
Okay.
And with that, Your Honor, the defense is ready to proceed.
Okay. Do we have an opening statement for the plaintiff?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Yeah, sorry. May it please the court. Peony Estates was an accident waiting to happen. As you will hear today, this winery, owned by Harper Martini, has a long history of health code infractions, violations, and has displayed a pattern of disregard for safe and sanitary practices as applied to the storage and usage of dangerous pesticides. You will also hear that as a result of these unsafe practices, Genesis Petrillo, the soon-to-be spouse of Harper Martini's child, Casey, ingested a bottle of wine called Cara, which was contaminated with dangerous pesticides. The evidence will show that the bottle of wine was bottled at Peony Estates, was given to Petrillo by Harper Martini, and that Genesis Petrillo's death occurred as a result of ingesting it. Your Honor, members of the jury, Midland's Building Code Section 12100 is a statute that dictates the requirements for storage and usage of pesticides. Specifically, it states that pesticide chemicals used in accordance with this section shall be identified, held, and stored in a manner that protects against the contamination of food, food contact surfaces, or food packaging materials. Now, the burden of proof rests with we, the plaintiff, today. As a result, we must show by a preponderance of the evidence that the actions or omissions by the staff of Peony Estates violated this statute, Statute 12100 of the Midlands Building Code, and were a direct and proximate cause of Genesis Petrillo's death. Specifically, in this case, we must show it to be more likely than not that Peony Estates and its employees violated Section 12100, that Harper Martini and the staff of Peony Estates knew or reasonably should have known of the code infractions and how to use pesticides safely. We must also show that as a result of this violation, the wine given to Genesis Petrillo became contaminated with isophenose pesticides, and that Genesis Petrillo's death was caused by ingesting that contaminated wine. Now, in order to meet that burden of proof and succeed on our claim of negligence per se, we will be calling 3 witnesses. First, we will call Riley Adkins O'Keefe to the stand. Now, Ms. Adkins O'Keefe is a health and safety inspector with the FDA. She will testify that as part of her duties, she performed several health inspections at Peony Estates. Now, in the process of discharging her duties, she will explain the occasions on which Harper Martini's winery had previously had wine contaminated with pesticides. She will further explain that on May 8th, 2019, mere weeks before Genesis Petrillo and Casey Soto's wedding, that Peony Estates was found to be in serious violation of 4 major elements of the health code. These violations included storing dangerous and poisonous pesticides in a facility where open bottles of wine were being processed, and the storage of a particular bottle of wine with the label reading Cara next to several empty cans of pesticide. Next, Sam Arnold will testify. Now, Ms. Arnold was the caterer at the wedding of Casey Soto and Genesis Petrillo, and she will testify concerning her own observations of the unsanitary storage of pesticides. Further evidence from Ms. Arnold will show that all other food and drink at the rehearsal dinner tested negative for the isophenose pesticide that was found in Genesis Petrillo's system. The Cara wine bottle was the only contaminated food item, as the evidence will show. Finally, Lonnie Paris will testify. Now, Mr. Paris is a freelance investigative journalist who infiltrated and investigated the improper sanitary practices at Peony Estates. In his testimony, Paris will confirm the presence of the bottle of wine labeled Cara, and will confirm that also that this bottle was in fact given to Genesis Petrillo the night before Genesis' death. Paris will also detail his observations of the unsafe practices with pesticides at Peony Estates. Now, throughout the course of today's trial, you will see how a consistent pattern of disregard for proper care as applied to the usage of pesticides at Peony Estates has finally resulted in real harm. And after all testimony has been given, the evidence will have shown that Genesis Petrillo's death was the unfortunate consummation of that accident waiting to happen. And we will ask that you find in favor of Joey Petrillo and the estate of Genesis Petrillo. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And sorry, defense, do you have an opening statement you would like to present?
Yes, Your Honor. May I
Go
proceed?
ahead. Yes.
Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury, and may it please the court. It is June 7th, 2019. Genesis Petrillo is getting ready for his wedding the next day. There has just been a celebratory dinner at Peony Estates. Genesis's mother-in-law gives him a unique bottle of wine. It has been a special evening. In order to celebrate, Genesis stays up drinking with his friend Angel Rodriguez. But then things take a turn for the worse. Genesis gets sick, really sick, and has to be taken to the hospital. The doctors do all that they can, but unfortunately, Genesis passes away. What you will learn today is that we do not know why. There are simply too many unanswered questions. But the plaintiff is here today, blaming Peony Estates. The plaintiff has filed a claim of negligence. In order for them to meet this burden, the plaintiff must prove that Peony violated a statute. And because they violated that statute, Genesis was harmed. The plaintiff must meet this burden by preponderance of the evidence. In other words, in order to find Peony Estates liable, the plaintiff must show that they more likely than not violated the statute. However, they will fail to meet that burden because there are simply too many unanswered questions. Today, we will call 3 witnesses to show you all of these questions that the plaintiff cannot answer. First, Dr. R. Cannon, a medical doctor with expertise in toxology and pharmacology, will take the stand. He will show you just how many unanswered questions there really are. He will tell you that, put simply, it is impossible to know what caused Genesis's death. He will show you the evidence that the plaintiff ignored. Second, Blair Osborne, the wedding planner for Genesis and Casey's wedding, will tell you that she has worked with Peony Estates for many years. She has never experienced any issues in her time planning events at Peony Estates. Third, you will hear from Austin Lewis, an employee of Peony Estates. She will detail for you how Peony was admittedly struggling with some insects, but she will tell you how they stored their pesticides responsibly and took careful steps to ensure that no one was harmed. By the end of this trial, it will be clear there are simply too many questions that the plaintiff cannot answer. That is why we will ask you to find Peony Estates not liable. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Pike. Plaintiff, would you like to call your first witness?
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff calls Riley Adkins O'Keefe to the stand.
Okay, welcome, Ms. O'Keefe.
May I proceed when my witness is ready?
Yes, you may.
Would you please state your name for the record?
Hi, I'm Riley Adkins.
And what is your occupation, Ms. Adkins O'Keefe?
So I'm a senior health and safety inspector for the Rapid River County Department of Health and Environmental Safety.
Do you have any specific certification or training for that role?
Yes, actually in August, I passed my annual certification as a Rapid River County Department of Health and Environmental Safety Food Service Inspector. And earlier in May 2020, I renewed my certification as a Food and Drug Administration Food Service Safety and Bioterrorism Prevention Inspector.
How long have you had your job?
I've worked for the DAGS since September of 2013, and I've held my current position as a senior health inspector since September 2017.
What is your educational background?
I received a Bachelor's of Arts in English from Xavier University and my master's degree in viticulture and enology from Midlands University, Rapid River Valley.
So what exactly does a senior health inspector for the DHES do?
DHES commonly conducts health and safety inspections on behalf of the FDA since we became an official designee in 2010. I myself have inspected over 170 wineries throughout my time as a health and safety inspector.
So I'd like to talk about those inspections at wineries. What exactly does that consist of?
So first, I present my credentials to a staff member, and then I will inform them that I'm inspecting the premises and conducting interviews to ensure that reasonable measures and precautions are taken for disease control, cleanliness, maintenance of the grounds and plant, and sanitary operations. If I find any violations of code, I issue a notice of violation.
Now, Ms. Adkins O'Keefe, in your time as an inspector, have you ever had cause to interact with Peony Estates or Harper Martini?
Yes, I've conducted several inspections of Peony Estates over the last several years, and I've had to cause interaction with Harper Martini.
When was that first inspection?
November 5th of 2015.
Could you describe for us how that inspection went?
I began by inspecting the premises, including the vineyard, production facilities, storage spaces, and the bottling area. None of these areas showed any of disease control or cleanliness requirements. Everything seemed very well organized and operated, and the employees seemed to be following all necessary protocols. The only problem I found was some pesticides stored in a shed that was too close to both the wine production area and the winery's kitchen.
And what kind of pesticide was used at Peony Estates?
They used bug off, an isofenton-based pesticide, and this was the only pesticide used at Peony Estates from the time of my first inspection in 2015 to the time of my most recent one on May 8th of 2019.
Now, after finding that pesticide stored too close to a kitchen, did you instruct Harper Martini regarding storage and usage of pesticides?
Yes,
Your Honor,
I
objection. This question calls for hearsay.
Okay, what statement specifically is hearsay?
Your Honor, the question that the attorney just asked the witness calls for hearsay in that he is asking her what she told Harper Martini.
Okay, response?
Your Honor, this witness can testify based on her own personal knowledge and without hearsay statements what she communicated to Harper Martini.
Okay, defense response to that.
Your Honor, an out-of-court statement, whether or not it's made by the witness herself, is still hearsay, and this still applies to hearsay even if it is Inspector O'Keefe who made this statement in a conversation with Harper Martini.
Okay, I do believe that, that is my understanding of the case law. Plaintiff, do you have a different interpretation you'd like to argue briefly?
Your Honor, no statements have been or will be elicited through this answer. The witness is simply responding as to what she instructs people regarding the storage and usage of pesticides.
In general?
Yes, but I suppose also specific to this case.
Oh, is it an instruction then that she's giving?
Yes.
Okay, to the extent that the statement is an instruction, then the objection is overruled.
Thank you.
could you repeat the question?
Sure. Did you instruct Harper Martini regarding the storage and usage of pesticides?
Yes, I informed her that pesticides are a poison and must be handled very carefully and stored appropriately. That appropriate storage consists of maintaining them a minimum of 50 feet away from any wine production or storage facilities, and that the use of pesticides must also follow strict protocols to ensure no contamination of food or beverages occurs.
Is this an instruction that you would normally give in the course of an inspection when you find something like that?
Yes.
Now, did you ever return to Peony Estates?
Yes, I returned July 12th of 2018.
What prompted you to conduct that inspection?
We received an anonymous tip that Peony had an ongoing problem with pests.
Your Honor, objection, hearsay.
Okay, response?
Your Honor, this statement, this anonymous tip, is not being offered to prove the truth of the matter asserted. Ms. Adkins O'Keefe can testify for herself whether or not she found pests. It's simply to show the actions that she took in response to this anonymous tip.
Okay, you can refer to the tip generally, but don't elicit any specific statements from the tip she received. So
Yes, Your Honor.
the objection is overruled for that limited purpose.
Thank you. So, Ms. O'Keefe, did you find that tip proved to be true?
Yes, it was true. I discovered various pests, including beetles and mites. Based on the number found and my training and experience, I concluded they had been present for at least 4 to 8 weeks.
Did you
Your
do
Honor,
anything else?
An improper opinion.
Please explain your objection.
How would the Inspector Adkins O'Keefe know that the bugs have been there for 4 to 8 weeks? This instructor has no way of being able to tell this.
Okay, plaintiff's attorney, do you have a different opinion?
Your Honor, we've laid foundation that this witness has sufficient training, knowledge, and experience of through her job as an inspector to determine the presence of pests and pesticides and
Okay, final word, Ms. Pike.
Your Honor, of course, this instructor can see whether or not there are pests, but this instructor cannot make any opinion on how long these pests have been there or the duration of their presence.
Okay, until some kind of foundation is laid about how she knows that, then I'm going to sustain the objection for now.
yes, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Adkins O'Keefe, did you do anything else during that inspection?
Yes, following protocol, I collected samples of wine from 20% of the barrels present. I then informed Harper Martini that the presence of pests or pesticides in stored wine was grounds for a serious violation and that laboratory analysis would determine whether or not Peony Estates was in violation of health codes.
And did you get those lab analysis results?
Yes, I did.
And what did those results show?
They showed a presence of isofenfos pesticides, but not a concentration that exceeded the allowable limit.
And did you return to Peony Estates after 2018?
Yes, I did my last inspection at Peony Estates on May 8th of 2019.
How did that inspection go?
Well, it did not go well. I found 4 major health code violations. My first one was 3 containers of pesticides were found in the bottling facility. The floor drainage system in the bottling room was not adequately draining excess liquids. I observed a singular bottle of Cara wine sitting on a shelf by itself where the pesticide canisters were. This was hazardous given the proximity of pesticides. And finally, I learned that the employees were confused about safe handling of pesticides and did not know about the importance of keeping pesticides away from the beverage production and processing areas.
Your Honor, objection, lack of personal knowledge.
A response?
Your Honor, lack of personal knowledge as to
the employees knowing whether or not what the standards are, what the protocols are.
Okay, response?
Your Honor, I believe the witness has stated that she gathered this information from the employees of Peony Estates.
Okay, response to that?
Your Honor, it's the case that the inspector gathered this information. We have not heard from who they gathered this information from, and we cannot make the statement that this inspector does know that the employees are not following the standards.
Okay, why don't you lay that foundation either again if you already did it or for the first time if you haven't, until that foundation is laid, which employees were spoken to, that she did in fact speak to the employees. The objection is sustained for now.
So Ms. Adkins O'Keefe, did you speak to employees at Peony Estates?
Yes, I spoke with Austin Lewis and Kirby Doolittle.
Now, what did you do as a result of the information you gained during your inspection?
I instructed Harper that she should instruct her employees regarding the dangers of pesticides and safe handling and storage procedures.
No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Okay, cross-examination. And before we move on, just for the spectators, sorry, I forgot to switch into gallery view. It won't affect your scores or anything, but just for the people watching, sorry, that was my mistake. But now we have the setup correct, so let's move on to the cross-examination.
Thank you. May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
Now, Ms. O'Keefe, you performed 4 inspections at Peony Estates ranging from 2015 to 2019. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And you would agree that you're familiar with the layout and the procedure at Peony Estates?
Yes.
And you've completed over 170 winery inspections on behalf of Rapid River County?
Yes, that's correct.
And would you say you're familiar with indigenous pests and insects?
Yes.
Now, upon your first visit of the estate, the grounds were maintained in proper accordance with the state's guidelines. Isn't that correct?
Yes, they were in compliance. They did not have their pesticides at least 50 feet away, but Harper Martini moved them. So I concluded my inspection and said they were in compliance with everything.
And you spoke to several individuals when conducting your investigation. Isn't that right?
Yes, that's correct.
One of these was the vineyard manager, Austin Lewis, wasn't it?
Yes.
And Lewis mentioned to you that the vineyards were in close proximity to the swamp and that had led to a rise in pests. Isn't that right?
Yes, he said that they had an excess number of pests, and so that's why they used an allowable amount of pesticides.
So despite this increase, you would agree that Peony Estates' use of pesticide was within the guidelines?
Yes.
You also spoke to Harper Martini, isn't that correct?
Yes, I did.
And that conversation was about improper pesticide storage?
Yes.
And Harper responded by clarifying that the pesticides were placed there by accident. Isn't that right?
Yes.
And she went on to say that they were aware of proper pesticide procedure at Peony Estates.
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
Your Honor,
Response?
if I may. This falls under Rule 801D2, which is Harper Martini speaking as an employee in her scope of employment at Peony Estates.
Okay, what's your response to that?
Your Honor, Harper Martini and Peony Estates are not opposing counsel's party opponent in this case.
How do you respond to the argument that as an employee of the business, it's a statement made by an agent of the business, and so then it's attributable to the party opponent?
Your Honor, myself and my co-counsel represent the estate of Genesis Petrillo, not Peony Estates.
Okay, Ms. Pike, what's your response to that?
Your Honor, this statement, again, it falls under Rule 801D2. Harper Martini is an employee of Peony Estates, which means that she is speaking as an employee in the scope of her employment, talking about pesticide use at Peony Estates, in which she is an employee.
Okay, the objection is sustained.
Thank you, Your Honor. Move to strike.
Yeah, to the extent any offending testimony made it onto the record, it is stricken.
Thank you.
Let me move on. The wine cellar itself was clean, was it not?
Yes.
Now, on to your second investigation. Your second investigation was spurred on because of an anonymous tip, isn't that right?
Yes, the FDA received an anonymous tip.
And when you arrived at Peony Estates for your second investigation, you instructed Martini to give you a thorough tour of the cellar, isn't that right?
Yes, that's right, but he was actually very hesitant in giving me the tour of the cellar because he said there was another tour. But when I arrived, there was no one in there.
Okay, and upon this investigation of the cellar, you found a high number of pests, did you not?
Yes, I did.
But this number did not violate any health or safety standards, did it?
No.
And after the cellar, you spoke with Austin Lewis, isn't that correct?
Yes.
And Austin Lewis told you that the storage facility did not violate any health or safety guidelines, did it?
That's correct.
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
Okay, response?
Your Honor, again, Austin Lewis is an employee of Peony Estates, and this falls under Rule 801D2, in which he's an employee speaking in the scope of his employment.
Okay, but 801D2 covers an opposing party's statement, and you're representing the estate, so I'm not getting that argument.
May I confer with my co-counsel for a minute?
Sure, you can, yes.
Thank you. Your Honor, this statement goes to an exception to hearsay, which is a plan or intent. And this is that the storage facility had the plan to store the pesticides in that. So it is an exception to hearsay.
Okay. Remind me again what the statement is that you want to get in.
The statement was that the storage facility didn't violate any health or safety guidelines, did it?
Sustained. The objection is sustained.
Move to strike, Your Honor.
Yep, stricken.
Thank you.
I'd like to move on to your third investigation of Peony. And now, in your third investigation, you found the cellar to be quite in order, isn't that right?
Yes.
And you were shown the newly constructed storage facility for pesticides, weren't you?
Yes, but I also found other pesticides in the bottling area.
But this newly constructed storage facility was an adequate distance from food and beverage production or storage areas, isn't that right?
Yes, it was adequate.
And during this investigation, you took notice of a bottle of wine labeled Cara, didn't you?
Yes, I did, and it was in close proximity to the pesticides.
However, the bottle was sealed tightly, isn't that correct?
Yes, but there is still a possibility it could have been contaminated.
However, just because it was close doesn't mean that it was definitely contaminated, isn't that right?
Objection, Your Honor. The question calls for speculation.
Response.
Your Honor, this instructor is speaking within her knowledge of pesticides.
Yeah, the objection is overruled. Thank you.
I'd like to move on to your final fourth investigation. During this final investigation, you witnessed all facilities in proper following of health and safety guidelines. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
Including the cellar,
Yes.
including pesticide storage,
Yes.
including food and beverage,
Yes.
as well as proper employee training.
That's correct.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, any redirect examination for this witness?
No redirect based on that, Your Honor.
Witness, you may step down. And plaintiff, you can go ahead and call your next witness.
Your Honor, the plaintiff would like to call Sam Arnold to the stand.
Okay. Ms. Arnold, you may take the stand. And go ahead and start when you're ready.
Please state your name and occupation for the benefit of the court.
My name is Sam Arnold, and I am Rapid River Valley's most prestigious food service provider.
How did you first come into contact with Peony Estates?
I first came into contact with Peony Estates when I catered their 1-year anniversary, which also happened to be the 1-year anniversary for my catering business as well.
And what did this event do for your company?
Well, this event, it brought an upswing of business to my catering business. It gave me more customers, but I still have Peony Estates as my biggest client. I cater many weddings and events at Peony Estates.
And would you say that you owe Peony Estates for your continued success?
I'm grateful to Peony Estates for the opportunity that they've given me, but much of my success is also due to my own cooking abilities.
Do you feel indebted to Peony Estates in any way?
Absolutely not. While I am grateful for the opportunity they have given me, I in no way feel indebted to them.
How many times, if any, did you notice any pesticide violations while working at Peony Estates?
I noticed 2 pesticide violations while working at Peony Estates.
Could you detail the first violation for the benefit of the court?
The first violation is when I was working at Peony Estates in late November. I witnessed Harper walking in from the vineyard. She was carrying a pesticide sprayer and a backpack. We walked into the kitchen and she set the pesticide sprayer down in the kitchen. I politely reminded her that pesticide was no place for a kitchen to be. And she then removed the pesticide. She brought it through a door labeled employees only, which I know leads to the bottling area of the winery from previous experience.
And could you detail the second violation for me?
The second violation occurred June 7th. It was the day of the rehearsal dinner. As we were preparing for the events in the kitchen, I looked and I noticed a can of pesticide close to where the Cara wine bottle was located.
And do you know if there were any people negatively affected by the food you prepared for the rehearsal dinner?
To my knowledge, no one was negatively affected by the food I prepared for the rehearsal dinner or the champagne.
No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Okay, cross-exam,
Yes, Your Honor.
go ahead.
Good afternoon, Ms. Arnold.
Good afternoon.
So you said that you've previously worked a lot with Peony Estates, correct?
I have. I've catered many events and weddings since I first met them in 2016.
And I know that you said that you attributed a lot of your success to your own cooking, but I would perceive that you say that you would owe a lot of your success to Peony Estates. Is that true?
I would.
And you bring your food to Peony Estates, correct?
I do bring my food to Peony Estates.
Specifically into their kitchen.
Most oftentimes, I prepare the food that I bring to Peony Estates at my own kitchen, since their kitchen does not meet my standards of organization and cleanliness.
Miss Arnold, you would never endanger someone eating your food, correct?
I would never.
So, considering that you actually have brought your food into Peony Estates kitchen, you would believe that Peony Estates is a safe place for your food.
I would believe most times it is a safe place for my food. Like I said before, I often prepare my food at my own kitchen, believing it meets my standards better than the kitchen at Peony Estates.
Miss Arnold, I'd like to redirect to discuss your involvement with the night of the rehearsal dinner between Casey Soto and Genesis Petrillo. So you returned to Peony Estates on June 7th, 2019, is that correct?
That is correct.
And this was around 11 a.m.
That is correct.
And you said that the kitchen seemed to be a little chaotic.
That is correct.
And this day, you saw Harper Martini with a bottle of wine. Is that true?
That is true. She had several bottles of wine.
And you have said that nothing seemed unsafe in the kitchen, correct?
It seemed a little disorganized, and I did notice a can of pesticide near the bottles of wine.
But Miss Arnold, you have said that nothing seemed unsafe in the kitchen that day.
Nothing seemed necessarily unsafe, no, just a little disorganized.
And after you had read the room and you seemed that nothing had been you perceived that nothing appeared unsafe in the kitchen, you began working on preparations for that night, correct?
That's correct.
Miss Arnold, did you see Genesis Petrillo drink from the car a bottle of wine?
I can't remember if I saw her drink necessarily from the bottle of wine.
I just need a yes or no answer, Miss Arnold.
I don't remember if I saw her drink from the bottle of wine.
Do you recall anyone drinking from the car a bottle of wine?
I recall perhaps seeing Genesis, but I was really busy that night and I wasn't focused really on Genesis. I was focused on preparing the food and making sure the night went smoothly.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, any redirect examination?
Not at this time, Your Honor.
Okay, the witness is excused. And plaintiff, you can go ahead and call your third witness when you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff calls Lonnie Paris to the stand.
Okay.
Please introduce yourself to the court.
Hello, my name is Lonnie Paris.
What do you do for a living, Lonnie Paris?
So my life has been dedicated to exposing the injustices that face corporate America, specifically towards our environment. I double majored in journalism and environmental science at Northwestern University. And I worked for a long time for BNN as a journalist for them. And then in 2018, I became a freelance investigator. So I would consider myself a journalist by trade and an environmentalist at heart.
And how did you first hear about Peony Estates?
The first time I heard was back in 2016 when I was working for BNN. I received a phone call from Danny Francesio, who's the owner of another Midlands winery. I believe the name was Rosie and Pedro. And Danny called me with a tip about Peony Estates.
And what did you do in response to this tip?
Well, I often get tips from businesses about their competitors. So, they're not always accurate, but I did my due diligence with each tip, including this one. So I took it seriously. I did a little bit of initial research about Peony Estates online to see if there had been any health code violations. And I didn't find anything online about people getting sick from their wine. So I had a lot of other cases at the time with BNN, so I didn't work on it for a while.
When was the next time you worked on the Peony Estates story?
The next time I worked on it was when I was a freelance investigator, no longer working for BNN. So that would have been, I think, in like July of 2018. I came across some of my old notes about Peony Estates from BNN. So I decided that I'd pick up that story.
And what did you do to find facts about this story?
Like I said, the first thing I did was an online search, but I didn't find any reports about people being poisoned. However, I did find online that Peony Estates is located right next to Salove Swamp.
What's the significance of Peony Estates being located near a swamp?
The reason that's important, and I know this from my previous work that I've done, pieces on swamps, is they tend to be swarmed with insects, and this would explain Peony Estates' use of insecticide.
What did you do next?
I decided the best thing to do would be to visit Peony Estates personally. So I took a visit on July 13th of 2018, but it was only on a tour of the publicly accessible areas of the estate. So I didn't find anything particularly out of the ordinary.
Did you visit again?
I did. So the next visit, I believe, would be July 16th of 2018. I took a guided tour, this time of Peony Estates, and the tour guide's name was Drew Matasokas. And towards the end of the tour, I snuck into an employees only door that was near the kitchen.
Did you find anything behind that door?
Yes, behind the door is the bottling area at Peony Estates, and there were tons of discarded canisters of pesticide. This pesticide was labeled bug off, and it was scattered in the back room. They appeared to
Objection,
be—
Your Honor, to 404 improper character evidence. This testimony is going to propensity. Therefore, it is improper character evidence under Rule 404.
Okay, what's your response, plaintiff?
Is it my understanding that opposing counsel is objecting to Lonnie Paris's perception of the pesticide canisters in the bottling area?
That evidence is improper character evidence.
Lonnie Paris is only testifying to his perception of his personal seeing of the pesticide in the bottling area.
Okay. The objection is sustained.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
After finding this information, were you caught?
No, I was not.
What did your investigation find overall?
Sure. So I found that Danny Francesio had been a bit overzealous with the 2016 tip. However, the pesticide usage had clearly increased since then due to a 2018 infestation.
Objection, Your Honor. Because of the previous objection to 404 striking the information of the record, because this is referencing that previous experience, this too would fall under 404 propensity and is still improper character evidence.
Okay, plaintiff, for what purpose are you offering this evidence of prior issues?
Your Honor, Lonnie Paris is testifying to the use of pesticides in Peony Estates in order to show that the pesticides were in proximity to the wine bottling area, which is relevant to our case theory today.
Okay, and how do you respond to that defense that shows the business practices and where they keep the pesticides?
Yes, Your Honor. I do argue that this is relevant. However, it is going towards propensity, that because it was done improperly once, they're going to show that it will be done improperly again, and therefore this evidence is improper under Rule 404.
Okay, I tend to agree with that argument, so the objection is sustained.
Thank you, Your Honor.
What did you learn about the production of wine at Peony Estates regarding the length of time between the grapes and the wine production?
Yeah, so on one of the guided tours that I took, I learned that their wine is created in 1-year batches, which means that the grapes from 2018 would be used to create the wine for 2019.
What else did you learn on your visits to Peony Estates?
On May 6th of 2019, another time I visited, I learned that a surprise inspection was supposed to come through Peony Estates.
What did you do after that?
Objection to hearsay that he heard there was a surprise inspection.
Okay, what's your response to that?
Your Honor, Lonnie Paris overheard an employee of Peony Estates talking about a surprise inspection, and therefore it is an exception to hearsay due to that employee being part of the party opponent.
Your Honor, if I may?
Yeah, go ahead.
We have not heard any evidence that this was made by an employee of Peony Estates.
Yep, you're right. I didn't hear any foundation about the employee making the statement, so until that foundation is laid, the objection is sustained.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Did you overhear any employees on your visit?
Yes, I did.
What did you hear them saying?
Yes, I heard one of the employees who was giving me the tour that was talking about a surprise inspection.
What did you do after that?
Sure. On May 8th of 2019, I returned to Peony Estates after being informed about the date of that surprise inspection from one of my FDA sources. I snuck in again and found that this time the bottling area had been completely cleared out and cleaned.
How about your next visit?
On May 30th, I also visited again. I snuck around the winery under the guise of being an assistant photographer for the wedding preparation. And I was able to access everything in the winery except for the bottling area because it was closed for maintenance. So I wasn't able to find much.
Did you visit the day of the rehearsal and rehearsal dinner for the wedding at Peony Estates?
Yes, I visited on that day. It would be June 7th of 2019. And that time I disguised myself as a member of the catering staff. I used lockpicks to get into the more heavily secured bottling area. And inside the bottling area, I found a single bottle of 2019 Cara wine sitting on a shelf. And then I also found a partially full canister of pesticide near the bottling area when I trailed Martini back to the area.
You see this bottle again?
Yes, I saw Martini gift the bottle to Genesis Petrullo after a short speech. And then later that night, I saw Petrullo on the dance floor and Petrullo seemed disoriented.
Your Honor, may I instruct my witness to refer to Exhibit 7, which has been previously entered into evidence?
That's fine.
Are you familiar with this document, Mr. Paris?
Yes.
What is this document?
Sure. Exhibit 7, it's the death certificate for Genesis. And I saw this document in the process of my investigation of this issue.
Now, what happened the day after the rehearsal on June 8th?
On June 8th, the day after the rehearsal, I learned that Genesis Petrullo had died from pesticide poisoning from reading the death certificate that was previously shown.
Do you know what happened to the rest of the 2019 Cara wine batch?
I was told by Peony Estates head winemaker Austin Lewis that the rest of that batch, the 2019 Cara batch, that it had been disposed of, which I guess that means the only person who drank it was Genesis, who died of pesticide poisoning.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay. Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Now, Mr. Paris, you don't work at Peony Estates.
Correct.
You don't know how their procedures for handling pesticides.
I do somewhat. I've done a lot of investigation about the issue.
But you wouldn't know what an employee knows about their
Sure.
use of pesticides.
Yeah, I wouldn't know as much information as an employee.
And you've also, of course, never been to an employee training session about pesticides.
Not at Peony Estates.
And your initial tip was in 2016, correct?
That was the first one, yes.
But there were no reports of illness.
When I looked up online in 2016, I didn't find any reports.
So then you checked back in 2 years later, correct?
Yes.
And there were still no reports of anyone becoming ill from Peony Estates.
I couldn't find anything online.
But you decided to start an investigation anyway.
Yeah, like I do with all of my tips, I try to investigate and find out.
But with this one specifically, you were hoping that it would help your career.
I foremost just want to expose injustice. I'd rather there not be a problem, not be a pesticide poisoning, but I investigate every tip I get because oftentimes there are.
Is it your testimony today that you were not hoping this would help your career?
I was not hoping for someone to die of pesticide poisoning or for corporations to be unjust. However, if the corporation is unjust, I want to find out about it and I want to do that well and do well in my career as a result. But I was not hoping for this company to be a bad company.
You signed a deposition. You signed an affidavit before testifying today?
Yes.
And you were notified that you had up until 24 hours before this trial to make any changes to that affidavit.
Yes, I was.
And you would recognize a copy of that affidavit?
Sure.
Your Honor, I'm now going to screen share Mr. Paris's affidavit.
Okay.
Give me 1 second. This is your affidavit, correct, Mr. Paris?
Yes.
And this is your signature at the back,
Yes.
on the bottom. Now, read to yourself as I read aloud. Lines 36 through 37. I guess part of me was hoping that if I actually found something, I might be able to help rejuvenate my journalism career. Did I read that correctly?
You did, which is just what I said. I was not necessarily wishing for the company to be bad, but if I found something that was unjust that the company was doing, I hope that doing so would help my career, because my career is to expose injustice.
That's a yes to my question. I read that correctly.
Yes, you did.
Now, you went on several tours of Peony Estates, correct?
Yes.
And on the second one, you walked into the employees only section, correct?
Yeah.
And you went inside an office.
Yes, I went inside Harper Martini's office.
And you began to look through all the paperwork on her desk.
Yeah, I looked through the paperwork.
However, the only thing that you found suspicious was when you overheard that something was happening at the Botanical Gardens, correct?
That is not correct. I actually found a memo on Harper Martini's desk that talked about how they were having an infestation. It was in 2018 of insects and how it was harming their business. And they were going to need to be using chemical pesticides.
I'll rephrase my question. One of the things you found suspicious was that you heard of an event happening at the Botanical Gardens, correct?
That was one of the things, as well as another, which I mentioned, was the memo.
That's a yes to my question.
Was your question one of the specific suspicious things was the Botanical Gardens?
Yes, Mr. Paris, that was my question.
Yes, that was one of them.
However, that suspicious event was just a marriage proposal.
Correct. Yeah.
Now, overall, this story has helped your career, correct?
Yes.
And you were told that if you can keep readers interested through your testifying in court, you would return to a job as a full-time journalist.
Correct.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Any redirect examination?
No redirect, Your Honor.
No redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor.
Okay, the witness is excused. Plaintiff, do you have any further witnesses to present?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, I take it that you are resting your case in chief. And would anybody like a recess before we go to the defense case in chief?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense would ask for a brief 5-minute recess.
Okay, 5 minutes sounds good to me. So let's get back here. I know we're probably all in different time zones. So at 10, for me it's 2:10, but for you, whatever hour at 10. All right, bye.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, if we're ready to go, let's get started. Do we have both sides back?
Yes, Your Honor, plaintiff is ready to proceed.
Okay, defense? Okay, I think you're on. Okay, I think you were on mute, so I don't know what you were saying.
I definitely was. My apologies, Your Honor. We will get our first attorney and witness paired queued up in just 1 second.
Okay, sounds good. Start when you're ready.
Your Honor, at this time, we'd like to call our first witness, Blair Osborne.
Okay, go ahead.
Hello, Mrs. Osborne. Could you please introduce yourself?
My name is Blair Osborne, and I am a private event planner, currently employed as the owner and founder of Bliss by Blair Events. In that role, I plan a variety of events, ranging from birthday parties to lucrative business events to, of course, my personal favorite, weddings.
How long have you been a wedding planner?
Well, I've always had a knack for planning. Even as a child, I liked to plan tea parties for my stuffed animals. Then I graduated to friends and family, and in 2011, I decided to take my talent to the public and open my own business.
As part of your job, have you ever encountered a woman named Harper Martini?
Yes, I know Harper.
What kind of relationship do you have with Miss Martini?
Harper and I started off with a professional relationship, but over the years of working together have become friends. Since 2015, I've hosted over 80 events at Peony Estates, and Harper and her staff have always been extremely helpful and kind to me. I've developed a warm regard for everyone there, but especially Harper. She's an absolute doll.
Now, why are you here today, Mrs. Osborne?
Well, after years of success at Peony Estates, Harper herself hired me to plan a wedding for her child, Casey Soto, and his fiancée, Genesis Petrillo. In that role, I was in charge of planning their wedding from October of 2018 all the way until its tragic end in June of 2019.
Were you ever able to meet with Genesis and Casey to discuss the wedding?
Not until January of 2019, no.
Was this meeting successful?
Yes. The first meeting between Casey, Genesis, and I was rather pleasant, actually. Wedding planning can be hectic, of course, but in that first meeting, we laid the foundation for the rehearsal dinner, ceremony, and even the reception all in one meeting. It seemed that we were all on the same page.
Were you able to meet with that group again after that?
Well, of course. Wedding planning takes more than just one meeting, you know. We met on several occasions along with Harper to discuss details such as the menu and the floral arrangements, get everyone back on the same page. The room often felt tense with the four of us, but there was one meeting in particular that didn't go very well.
What meeting was that?
Well, we had a meeting scheduled for May 12th in 2019, but the day before that, Casey and Genesis had attended a party with the rest of the wedding crew. They walked in the next day to discuss decorations and nobody said a word. I was going on and on about all the different types of flower arrangements. I mean, roses, peonies, carnations. I even threw out sunflowers to see if I could get a reaction, and nothing. Then all of a sudden, Harper pulled out her phone and started playing some message that Genesis had left for her.
Would you recognize a copy of that message if it was shown to you today?
Yes, I believe so.
Per stipulation, Your Honor, Exhibit 8 has been pre-admitted, and Mrs. Frankie will now display that for us.
Okay.
Thank you. Now, Ms. Osborne, to the best of your knowledge, is this an accurate copy of that message?
Yes, it is.
And to the best of your knowledge, were there any other outbursts at future meetings with that group?
Objection, Your Honor. I would object to the relevance of this line of questioning. At issue today is whether or not Peony Estates was negligent in the storage and usage of pesticides, and evidence concerning outbursts between Harper Martini and Genesis Petrillo are not relevant to this case.
Okay, what is the relevance? sense.
Oh, I apologize, I accidentally muted. Your Honor, this is to show that Genesis has a history of getting drunk, and we're trying to use this to show that in the future he might have done so as well.
Okay, plaintiff, how do you respond to that?
Your Honor, in that case, I would amend my objection to improper character evidence.
Mm-hmm. And response to the improper character evidence.
Your Honor, David v. Olafson and Farrow on page 5 states that so long as acts or practices are plausibly connected to the case at hand, they can be connected and considered in trial and are not subject to the rules of character evidence.
Okay, but wouldn't that argument require your theory to be that the drinking was pretty much continuous so as to constitute one act, essentially, one long act of being drunk?
I'm not sure if I understand, Your Honor.
Okay, that case you just cited, if the events are so related that then you can argue that they essentially constitute one act. So you're not saying prior act, therefore, because of the prior act, the future act is more likely to have occurred. That's my understanding of that case, and on that basis, I'm going to sustain the objection to improper character evidence.
Yes.
Move to strike, Your Honor.
Yep. Any offending testimony is stricken.
Thank you.
I'd like to move on, Ms. Osborne. Were your preparations able to keep the rehearsal on track?
Yes, everything was right on schedule. The weddings I planned run like a well-oiled machine, and I was determined that this one would be no exception.
Did anything happen during Harper's toast?
Well, despite expressing a few of her frustrations about the rehearsal dinner during her speech, Harper stuck to our original plan. You see, prior to the party, we had decided to carve out time in the evening to allow her to present gifts of wine to the entire wedding party as a thanks for their participation in the whole ceremony. She even reserved a special bottle for Genesis and presented it to her. It was so beautiful that even I teared up a bit, and I've been doing this for years.
Do you know what happened to the bottle of wine that Harper gave Genesis?
Genesis opened the bottle, and it looked to me as if he poured a few glasses of it, but that's all I saw because a cater waiter dropped a tray and half of our appetizers ended up on the floor.
When was the last time you saw Genesis that night?
Right before I left to go home. He was at the cocktail station.
About what time did you see Genesis at the cocktail station?
Around midnight. Most of the other guests had gone to their rooms at that point, but the party continued on.
When you saw Genesis at the cocktail station, how did he seem to you?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance as to this witness's opinion on how Genesis Petrillo seemed.
Okay, what's the relevance of this line of testimony?
Your Honor, this witness is about to state how she perceived Genesis and that he appeared to be drunk. And again, this is going to show that Genesis Petrillo did in fact drink a lot that night.
And why is that relevant?
This is to go to show that, as we will talk about later, that being drunk and having consumed a lot of alcohol could be one of the reasons for Genesis Petrillo's death.
Okay, briefly respond to that, plaintiff.
Yes, Your Honor. At issue in this case is whether or not actions or omissions by Peony Estates employees caused the death of Genesis Petrillo, and this testimony does not go to that.
Okay, the objection is overruled. Please continue.
I'd like to re-ask that question. When you saw Genesis at the cocktail station, how did he seem to you?
Well, he was quite loud, stumbling around the party. I assume he was trying to dance based off of his movements, but he seemed pretty drunk to me. From what I saw, I thought he'd have a bad hangover in the morning, so I left to go home.
And no further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Now, Mrs. Osborne, you are testifying voluntarily today, correct?
I am.
You were not ordered to appear in court?
I don't believe so, no.
You were not subpoenaed to testify at this hearing.
No,
Now, you were also paid $22,000 by Harper Martini. Isn't that right?
I was for my services as a wedding planner.
You were paid for a wedding that never happened, correct?
Yes, I was.
Now, in the course of planning for this wedding with Harper Martini, you did overhear a phone call that Harper Martini answered, right?
I did.
You didn't know who that phone call was from, did you?
No, I did not.
You didn't immediately know what it was about, did you?
No, not at first.
But you didn't need to know that to hear what Harper Martini said, right?
That's correct.
And distinctly, you remember Harper Martini saying, "I don't care what that clown Adkins O'Keefe said. Do not waste the employee's time with more training," right?
Yes, that's what I heard.
And you also remember Martini saying, "Keep the Cara bottle of wine where it is," right?
Yes,
And lastly, you remember Harper Martini saying, "No, don't move the pesticides," correct?
yes, that's what I heard.
No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Okay, any redirect based on that?
Not at this time, Your Honor. I just asked that this witness be able to virtually step down.
Yep, the witness may virtually step down, and defense, you can go ahead and call your next witness when you're ready.
Your Honor, the defense calls Dr. Raina Cannon to the stand. May I proceed?
You may.
Good afternoon. Please introduce yourself to the jury.
Good afternoon. My name is Renee Cannon.
What do you do for a living, Dr. Cannon?
I am a medical consultant for Gardner Consulting, Inc.
What does a medical consultant do?
So there's several things we do, but what we're really doing is we're kind of giving a second opinion. This means we're going to read the reports of other doctors, and then we're going to look at them and evaluate to ensure that patients are receiving the best care and doctors aren't making easy assumptions, both of which are going to be relevant to malpractice suits.
Where did you go to school?
I attended the Ohio State University, where I graduated with my Bachelor of Science in Chemistry in 1990, and I graduated from Harvard Medical School in 1996 with a degree with an emphasis in toxicology.
Explain your experience in the field of toxicology.
Following my time at Harvard, I worked as the chief toxicologist at Massachusetts General Hospital for 9 years before moving on to teaching at Midlands Medical School for another 9 years, and I finally came to my job at Gardner Consulting, where I've worked for the last 6 years.
How do you approach a case like this as a medical consultant?
With a case like this, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to collect any and all materials that are going to be relevant to my findings. This means reports from the attending physician, from the hospital, the patient's medical records, and in cases where I don't have access to the deceased, I'm going to be using the certified death certificate.
Is this method reliable?
This method is the gold standard in my field, and similar to a case study, is the basis of all medical training.
And did you reliably apply this method in regards to today's case?
I applied this method carefully and reliably, just as I was taught in medical school and as I taught my students when I was a professor.
What materials do you typically review in a case like this?
In a case like this, I'm going to review materials such as toxicology reports and unknown poison analysis. I'm going to review the attending physician's report, the certified death certificate, and any affidavits I am provided with.
What materials did you use in regards to today's case?
For today's case, I reviewed several materials. This includes the death certificate certified by Dr. Kwan, the toxicology and unknown poison analysis reports conducted and run by Midland River Valley Hospital. I also reviewed an affidavit prepared by Angel Rodriguez and an alcohol impairment chart and Dr. Kwan's report as the attending physician.
Were these materials sufficient?
These materials are more than sufficient.
What did Dr. Kwan report about Mr. Petrillo's cause of death?
Dr. Kwan reported two possible considerations for Ms. Petrio's cause of death. Initially, this consideration was that Ms. Petrio had alcohol poisoning. The second was that Ms. Petrio was suffering from respiratory arrest stemming from organophosphate poisoning.
And what did you conclude about the causes of death Dr. Kwan considered?
I concluded that Dr. Kwan failed to adequately consider one possible cause of death and completely ignored another.
Which cause of death did Dr. Kwan fail to adequately consider?
Dr. Kwan failed to sufficiently consider alcohol poisoning as a possible cause of Petrio's respiratory arrest.
Explain the symptoms of alcohol poisoning.
There are several symptoms of alcohol poisoning. This includes nausea, vomiting, the inability to walk or stand, and in extreme cases, incontinence or the inability to control defecation and urination.
Which of these symptoms did Mr. Petrio have?
Mr. Petrio displayed all of these symptoms and more.
What did Dr. Kwan conclude about alcohol poisoning in this case?
Dr. Kwan ultimately concluded that alcohol poisoning was not the cause of Ms. Petrio's respiratory arrest.
What did you notice about this?
What I noticed about this was Mr. Petrio had a BAC of 0.16, and this was taken 2 hours after emergency services were called.
Explain how BAC works.
So, unlike what most people think, BAC doesn't start decreasing the moment you stop drinking. It's going to keep increasing as your body absorbs alcohol. About an hour after you stop drinking, this is when your body is going to start processing all of this alcohol, and we're going to start to see that decrease in a person's BAC.
Now, was a blood alcohol content of 0.16 consistent with Mr. Petrio's symptoms on the night of June 7th, 2019?
It was consistent with several symptoms. However, Mr. Petrio did display symptoms that would indicate a higher BAC.
Which were those?
Mr. Petrio's respiratory arrest, ultimately falling unconscious, and incontinence are indicative of a BAC of 0.3 or higher.
So, Dr. Cannon, what did you conclude about alcohol poisoning as a possible cause of death?
I concluded that it is possible that Mr. Petrio's respiratory arrest was caused by alcohol poisoning.
Now, what was the other factor that Dr. Kwan didn't consider?
Dr. Kwan never considered that Mr. Petrio may have had an unknown allergy.
Why did you consider this?
Allergies are autoimmune responses, and we're learning both more about autoimmune responses and allergies all the time. The medical field is still working on that knowledge, so it is entirely possible that Mr. Petrio was suffering from a previously unknown allergy. Furthermore, more and more adults are being diagnosed with allergies.
How are allergies typically tested for?
So you're going to test for allergies in about 3 ways. The most common is that you're going to do a blood test. This poses the least amount of harm to the patient as we are not exposing them to the allergens. However, you can also use skin prick tests and general avoidance. However, both of these do pose a risk of harm to the patient.
Was Petrio ever tested for allergies?
None of the records I received showed that Petrio had been tested for allergies.
And was Mr. Petrio tested for allergies on June 7th?
I received no records indicating that River Valley Hospital ran any form of an allergy test on Mr. Petrio.
So could you rule out an allergic reaction as a possible cause of death?
I could not. It is possible that Mr. Petrio's respiratory arrest was caused by an allergic reaction.
Now, how are organophosphate poisonings typically treated?
You're going to inject an antidote into the patient.
Was an antidote administered in this case?
Yes, Dr. Kwan did administer the antidote to Mr. Petrillo. However, almost immediately after that antidote was administered, Mr. Petrillo had a seizure, fell into a coma, and subsequently passed away.
Would we be able to determine for sure if Mr. Petrillo had organophosphate poisoning?
We cannot determine for sure that Mr. Petrillo's respiratory arrest was caused by organophosphate poisoning.
So overall, what did you conclude about Mr. Petrillo's possible causes of death?
I concluded that it is most likely that Mr. Petrillo died from respiratory arrest. However, I cannot conclude what exactly caused that respiratory arrest. There are too many unknowns.
Thank you, Dr. Cannon. No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, do we have a cross-examination for this witness?
Your Honor.
Go ahead when you're ready.
Now, Dr. Cannon, you were hired by Harper Martini for a $50,000 flat fee, correct?
That is correct.
And now moving on, were you able to examine the body of Genesis Petrillo?
I was not. However, I didn't need to.
Would examining this body have helped you in your conclusions?
More information always helps. However, it's not standard practice.
And would you have been able to run additional tests with access to the body?
That is also correct. Again, it's not standard practice.
And now let's talk about your conclusions. You stated that Petrillo may have died from alcohol poisoning, correct?
That is correct.
And you agree that their blood alcohol content was 0.16% at the time of death?
Yes, at the time that it was tested, it was 0.16%.
And it would be extremely unlikely for someone to die of having 0.16% blood alcohol content, correct?
If that is their true peak BAC, that is correct.
You also said it was unlikely because the lowest blood alcohol content that you've ever seen cause a fatality was 0.30%, which is almost double.
That is correct as a peak BAC.
Did you say that it was the peak BAC in the report that you swore?
That 0.3% is the lowest peak BAC we're going to see a death at?
Yes.
That is correct.
If I may direct the witness to the third page of their report that has been sworn in for today's testimony. Yeah, if you could put that up on the screen. I apologize. I rescind my statement. I'll move on with the questioning. Now, you stated that Petrillo may have died from an allergic reaction, correct?
That is correct.
But there were no rashes or inflammation indicating an allergic reaction on the body, correct?
That is correct.
And Petrillo had no medical history of any allergic reaction.
There was nothing in the records I was provided with.
And so do you admit that alcohol poisoning or an allergic reaction would not explain the presence of pesticide in Petrillo's stomach and blood, according to Dr. Kwan's report?
It would not.
And let's talk about why you came to the conclusions you did. Gardner Consulting's biggest client is Detsky Roach and Rodent Killer, who make chemical pesticides, correct?
That is correct.
And your firm would lose them as a client if you found pesticide to be responsible for Genesis Petrillo's death, correct?
There is a
Objection, Your Honor, to hearsay as to the statements of the client of Dusty Roach and Rodent Killer.
Overruled.
If I may re-ask the question, and your firm would lose them as the client if you found pesticide to be responsible for Genesis Petrillo's death, correct?
There is potential for that.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, any redirect examination of this witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Dr. Cannon, why did you conclude that both alcohol poisoning and allergic reaction could have caused Mr. Petrio's death?
To start with alcohol poisoning, it is possible because Mr. Petrio was not tested for his BAC when he arrived at the hospital, and it was not until 2 hours after emergency services were called that Mr. Petrio had a significantly higher peak BAC. And because we don't know much about allergies, and Mr. Petrio could have come into contact with an unknown substance, especially because there was a buffet at the wedding, it is possible that there's something new that Mr. Petrio came into contact with and had an allergic reaction to.
Your Honor, testimony about any food or food at the wedding would be outside the scope of my cross.
Okay. Yeah, what's your response?
He did speak about allergic reactions. Dr. Kwan is simply clarifying the point opposing counsel made during his cross.
No, I think I agree with opposing counsel that that this is going outside the scope. I think that the drinking, the alcohol poisoning, okay, that was within the scope, but this seems to be out of the scope.
Yes.
So the objection is existing.
Dr. Cannon, can you explain a little further why you thought an allergic reaction might be a possible cause of death?
So with allergic reactions, again, we don't know much about what causes them. And while it is likely that in most cases of an allergic reaction, we would see a rash or inflammation, we do not have to. So it is possible that even though Mr. Petrio did not display this symptom, he was still having an allergic reaction.
Thank you, Dr. Cannon. No further questions, Your Honor.
Hey, does the defense have a third witness to call?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense would like to call Miss Austin Lewis to the stand.
Okay, Ms. Lewis, please take the stand. And you may go ahead with your direct examination whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon. Please state your name for the record.
Hello, my name is Austin Lewis.
And Mrs. Lewis, what do you do for a living?
Well, I make wine at Peony Estates for Miss Harper Martini.
Can you explain how you got involved with wine production?
Yeah, I can. So I grew up in Midlands, and my mom was actually in charge of the productions of the old Cumberland's Farm Winery. And honestly, I learned a lot under her.
Would you please tell the jury how you ended up working at Peony Estates?
Of course. So in 2005, Danny Francasio bought the Cumberland's Farm Winery, and I worked under him for a little bit. However, I was then offered a job by Harper Martini to work at Peony Estates.
Ms. Lewis, I'd like to discuss you and Miss Martini's specific responsibilities at Peony Estates. What are your responsibilities at the winery?
Well, since Peony Estates has been open, I have overseen our growing, harvesting, fermentation, aging, and bottling of wine.
And to your knowledge, what are Miss Martini's responsibilities at Peony Estates?
So Harper has more to do with the business side of things. She's also in charge of our bed and breakfast, the tours that happen a few times a week, and specifically our event venues.
In your involvement with winemaking, has Peony Estates had any issues with its wine production?
Yes. Recently we've had some issues with pests.
And how did you deal with these pests?
Well, at first we used organic solutions. They weren't working. So we were forced to use pesticides, specifically the brand Bug Off. However, using pesticides was not a regular occurrence at Peony Estates.
Ms. Lewis, does Peony Estates have a policy for pesticide usage?
Yes, of course we do.
And what is that policy?
So the winery holds an annual training for all of the employees. And, we require employees to learn how to handle and use pesticides. And, we require that our employees have to immediately change into fresh clothes and wash their hands after handling these pesticides and before they participate in wine production or other harvesting activities.
And to your knowledge, does the staff follow these directions and safety precautions?
To my knowledge, yes, we do.
When did Peony Estates begin to enforce these mandatory safety precautions for its employees?
So we started to enforce these policies in October of 2015, and I personally supervised all of our employees and made sure that they were implementing these precautionary measures.
And were there any other measures that Peony Estates took to ensure the safety of its customers?
Well, yes, of course. In 2016, I roped off portions of the slope base on our property with the most drainage. By doing this, we were able to prevent dangerous chemicals from entering our wine production facility.
And what did Peony Estates do with the grapes in these roped off areas, Ms. Lewis?
So these grapes were explicitly removed from our production and were not to be used. We threw them out on a yearly basis, and we actually lost about 20% of our production because we threw out these grapes. However, we had no choice but to do so for the safety of our customers.
Ms. Lewis, was Peony Estates winery policy ever reviewed by a health professional?
Yes, in 2018, we had a health inspection of the policies that I had just mentioned.
And what did this 2018 health inspection involve?
So a health inspector, sampled and tested 20 of our wines during the 2018 visit and did not find any unsafe levels of pesticides in any of them.
Ms. Lewis, I'd like to focus your attention to the week of June 7th, 2019, which was the week of the rehearsal dinner between Genesis Petrillo and Casey Soto. At the time, were you using the same policy regarding pesticides that we previously discussed?
Yes, we were.
Were pesticides used prior to the night of that wedding rehearsal dinner?
Yes, but they were used more as a precautionary measure. So we had sprayed several days before the wedding, and so we had a little bit of extra pesticide that we threw away, just to make sure we kept things safe. Storing these pesticides close to the production area was not a regular practice, and I personally supervised everything that we did.
Ms. Lewis, based on your supervision of this pesticide spraying, do you believe that any of the pesticides could have contaminated Peony Estates wine production?
No, absolutely not. We moved everything from the bottling area for 48 hours following our pesticide.
Objection, Your Honor. This witness is a lay witness and they do not have expert testimony or expert knowledge in this field.
Overruled.
Can I continue or? Well, like I was saying, no, absolutely not. We had moved everything from the bottling area for 48 hours following our pesticide spraying, including the bottle of Cara wine that Miss Martini gave Genesis.
Mrs. Lewis, for the 48 hours you were spraying with pesticide, where was the bottle of Cara?
It was away in a shed while we were spraying our pesticides. That was our procedure.
Thank you. No further questions.
Okay, have we got a cross-examination for this witness?
Yes, Your Honor. If I might proceed. So, Ms. Lewis, during your testimony, you stated that pesticide use was not a common practice at Peony Estates. Is that correct?
No, we used it to, handle our pest issue, but we did not use it regularly.
All right. Give me 1 second. I'd like to refer you to your affidavit. Give me 1 second. I'm trying to get it on here.
No worries.
Okay. Here, I'm going to share my screen for you.
Okay.
So, read to lines 51. Here, I'll read it out for you guys. As a result, in 2015 of October, Peony Estates started using a chemical pesticide on the vines throughout the growing season, and we continue to do so today. That correct?
Yes, I had already said that we did use pesticides, but not as a regular occurrence.
So you did not use them throughout the growing season?
No, like I admitted that we do use pesticides.
Excuse me, Your Honor, objection. This is improper impeachment. She did not go through the direct steps to impeach Miss Lewis.
Okay, what are the rules nowadays? Is improper impeachment a valid objection? Why don't you tell me, plaintiff? Okay, what's your response to the improper impeachment objection?
That Miss Lewis directly contradicted her affidavit, and I was just pointing that out.
Okay. I don't actually know what the rule is, but I'm going to overrule that objection for now. I take it that you're objecting to certain formalities that were not followed, but I don't know if that's a real objection for this purpose. So overruled for now. Please continue.
All right, thank you, Your Honor. And you work for Peony Estates, is that correct?
Yes, I do. I am in charge of our wine.
And you have a 10% stake in this company, correct?
Yes, I do. I'm very grateful for Harper Martini for bringing me on her board.
So that means that you would lose money if this suit is lost, correct?
Well, yes, technically, but I consider myself as very qualified and, you know, although it would be an unfortunate loss, I'm confident I can get another job.
And you mentioned in your affidavit that Peony Estates was inundated with pests, beetles, mites, and flies. Is that correct?
Yes, we did have a bit of a pest issue.
And so in October 2015, you started using a chemical pesticide because the organic pesticide did not work, correct?
Yes, that is true.
And in mid-2018, Peony Estates had a severe pest infestation in the wine cave and bottling area. Is that correct?
Yes, we started to have some issues with pests in our bottling area, unfortunately.
And so in response to that, you started using chemical pesticides in the bottling area and the wine cave, correct?
Yes, correct. However, we would move everything out and then we would spray, and then after 48 hours, we'd bring it back in.
And you vigorously oppose the use of chemical pesticide, is that correct?
Yeah, so I thought that our winery should kind of be an organic winery. And, you know, I just thought if we started using chemical pesticides, it would kind of look bad as, you know, an organic image.
And you feared that a large portion of the crop would be exposed to unsafe levels of chemical pesticide, correct?
Yes, so that is why I ended up actually roping off the grapes towards the end of the slope, and we threw those out every year.
And you feared using the chemical pesticide because there wasn't adequate drainage in the flat area of the vineyard, correct?
Yes, that was the area where we roped off those grapes, and then those grapes in those areas are the ones that we would throw out, about 20% of our production value.
Was there any drainage at all in the bottom of the vineyard?
I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. I'm sorry.
In your affidavit, you said we didn't worry about installing adequate drainage in the flat area at the bottom of the vineyard, and there wasn't any, correct?
Oh, yes. So that was before we started using chemical pesticides. So to my knowledge, because of this improper draining, that's why I roped off that area.
And in 2018, you told Harper Martini to dispose of the pesticide-contaminated grapes, which was 20% of the harvest, correct?
Yes, I did tell her that.
Were you in town when this occurred?
No, I was not in town, and so unfortunately, I do not know if that happened, but none of the employees came to me told me that they had to use those grapes.
When you inspected the amount of grapes harvested, you said you wouldn't have noticed if the other grapes had been mixed in, correct?
Yeah, that's true. I wouldn't have noticed, but, you know, objectively, it was about the same that we have every year. So I was confident in my employees.
So you cannot be sure whether or not Harper's brought the contaminated grapes, correct?
No, I cannot be 100% sure, but again, none of my employees came to me and told me that Harper made them use those grades.
And did you ask Ms. Martini to retrain the employees on proper storage and handling procedures after the May 8th inspection?
Yes, I did. I thought, doesn't hurt our employees getting retrained again.
And were you allowed to retrain those employees?
No, unfortunately, I was not allowed, but it wasn't a big deal.
And are you familiar with Exhibit 12?
Yes, I am.
All right. I'll share it with everyone. So this document, you drafted this memo and sent this out to all the employees, correct?
Yes, I did do that.
And so you said that you needed all the employees to imminently spray pesticide quickly and cheaply because nothing else matters, correct?
I'm sorry, where does it say that?
Right here.
We need to. Yes, I did write that.
And then you also told the employees that if they did not finish the spraying by the end of the month, they would have to lay people off, correct?
Well, yes, we are a business and, we have to stay afloat.
Objection, Your Honor, to best evidence.
Explain your objection.
Well, according to Rule 1002, if best evidence is going to be talked about, it needs to be specifically entered into the case.
Your Honor, I was establishing the document and its contents before I put it in as evidence.
What's the, sorry, Ms. O'Rourke, what did she say that violates the rule?
We just ask that it be entered before the contents are discussed, Your Honor.
Okay, yeah, I agree with that. You can, discuss the kind of nature of the contents, but don't discuss the specifics of it until it's admitted.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Then I move for Exhibit 12 to be moved into evidence, Your Honor.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
It's admitted.
All right. And that memo was sent out on July 1st, 2018, correct?
Yes, I believe so.
Your Honor, would you like me to repeat the lines of questioning that I had previously done?
No.
All right, thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Okay. Okay. So anything further for this witness?
No, Your Honor. I just asked that my witness be allowed to step down.
Okay, you can go ahead and step down, Ms. Lewis.
Thank you.
And does the defense have any further witnesses to call?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. So are you resting your case in chief?
Yes.
Do we have, I don't know how far away all loss is, so it's, you guys tell me if you want to break and how long we should take.
I'm okay with either, Your Honor. I'm good with taking a recess or moving on to closing statements.
Okay.
Your Honor, I would prefer to have a recess if it's possible.
Okay, 5 minutes, does that sound good? Is that good? Do you need longer?
Yes, Your Honor.
10 or 5?
5, either works.
Okay, let's do 5 minutes. See you back soon. Okay, the judges are back and ready to continue. So plaintiff's closer, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and start. Oh, wait, let me change back to speaker view. Okay, now you're all set.
Sorry about that, Your Honor.
No worries, just go ahead whenever you're ready.
All right. If it please the court, Your Honor, members of the jury, throughout the duration of this trial, we the plaintiff has showcased just how Peony Estates violated Section 12-100 of the Midlands Building Code by failing to put sufficient restrictions and precautions in place to protect the contamination of food contact storages, and food packaging materials by pesticides, and by failing to store pesticides at the winery in a manner that sufficiently protected against the contamination of food contact surfaces, and food packaging materials by pesticides. We have also proved that the staff of Peony Estates knew about the code violations and that these violations directly caused the death of the late Genesis Petrillo. We have shown you just how the accident waiting to happen at Peony Estates did happen. During this trial, we the plaintiff called upon Riley Adkins O'Keefe, Sam Arnold, and Lonnie Paris to prove by preponderance of evidence that Peony Estates acted negligently. Riley Adkins O'Keefe, a health and safety inspector with the FDA, testified that Peony Estates had previously had wine contaminated by pesticides, almost dangerously so. Ms. Adkins O'Keefe found pesticides in the bottling area, inadequate drainage, and a bottle of Cara wine next to pesticides, the same mixture that Genesis consumed the night that she died. Lastly, Ms. Adkins O'Keefe found that employees were unsure of proper procedures for dealing with pesticides. We next called Sam Arnold to the stand. Sam Arnold testified that the kitchen at Peony Estates was never up to her professional standards. And she also testified that she found pesticide containers in the kitchen not once, but twice while working on this specific wedding event. The second such incident occurred on June 7th, 2019, or the morning of the rehearsal dinner. The morning before Petrillo was poisoned, the morning before she died. And lastly, we called Lonnie Paris to the stand. Paris testified that he found pesticides near a bottle of Cara wine, and that the same bottle that Paris saw the defendant give to Petrillo was this bottle of Cara wine. That was the wine that killed Genesis Petrillo. The defense called upon Blair Osborne, Dr. Cannon, and Austin Lewis to testify. And while the testimony of Blair Osborne did not offer much to the case at hand, Osborne detailed a call in which Harper Martini, owner of Peony Estates, told the other person on the line not to, quote, waste the employee's time with more training. Next, the defense called upon Dr. Renee Cannon. Not only was Dr. Cannon paid a $50,000 flat fee to testify here today, but she would have also lost her job if she found pesticide poisoning to be the sole cause of Genesis Petrillo's death. Lastly, the defense called upon Austin Lewis. Austin Lewis testified that she could not be sure whether or not the grapes contaminated by pesticides were included in the 2018 harvest because she was not there during the harvest. Ms. Lewis also testified that she was unable to retrain the employees on proper protocols for pesticide use and handling. Lastly, she testified that through a memo sent to all of the employees that Peony Estates would lay off employees if they did not finish spraying the spraying by the end of the month. The defense would have you believe that we cannot be sure if negligence actually occurred, that maybe Genesis Petrillo died from something other than pesticide poisoning. However, this is not the case. The facts are as follows. Peony Estates violated numerous statutes, such as keeping pesticides in the kitchen or in the bottling areas, and not training their employees on safe handling and storage procedures. These statutes are intended to protect the public. The improper storage of pesticides and the omitting of employee training directly caused the type of harm that the statutes were intended to prevent, and that Genesis Petrillo, as previously stipulated, was a member of the statute's protected class. Your Honor, members of the jury, the defense would have you believe that the deceased, Genesis Petrillo, just suddenly up and died. No pesticide poisoning. Maybe it was alcohol poisoning. They honestly could not tell you exactly what happened to Genesis Petrillo that night. However, with all the facts that we have accumulated throughout this trial, the plaintiff has brought to your attention that it was directly pesticide poisoning that contributed to Genesis Petrillo's death, and that it was directly caused by the actions of Peony Estates. Your Honor, members of the jury, we ask that you side with the plaintiff and you find Peony Estates to be liable of all charges.
Okay, thank you. Defense, the floor is yours when you're ready.
Your Honor. May it please the court. Where's the bottle? Where's the pesticide? Where's the proof? On the night of June 7th, 2019, Harper Martini attended the wedding rehearsal for her daughter, Casey Soto, and her fiance, Genesis Petrillo. The night of this rehearsal dinner, Miss Martini graciously gifted Mr. Petrillo a bottle of Cara wine. Miss Martini had spent time perfecting this bottle, making it special for Mr. Petrillo, giving it to him as a peace offering, a fresh start for their emerging family. The night was a momentous occasion, an evening full of laughing, talking, and lots of alcohol. Specifically, Mr. Petrillo consumed a lot of alcohol that night. More so, the bottle of Cara wine he was gifted in less than 2 hours. That same night, Mr. Petrillo was sent to the hospital, and while initially diagnosed with alcohol poisoning, he was later diagnosed with pesticide poisoning. Miss Martini was shocked by Mr. Petrillo's hospitalization, unaware of it until 2 a.m. when she received a phone call. We, the defense, will be the first to admit that Peony Estates has been known to use pesticides in the past. However, since dealing with health code violations, Peony Estates has maintained a proper and clean environment based on its safety precautions and policies. Harper Martini has performed her exact responsibilities at Peony Estates and was not negligent in the running of her company, nor in her creation of the Cara bottle of wine given to Mr. Petrillo. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we are here today to discuss the plaintiff's accusations against Harper Martini and her company, Peony Estates. Miss Martini's winery is being charged with negligence per se. And by definition, negligence per se is a category of offenses involving the violation of a statute that is designed to protect the public from a specific type of harm. The main basis for liability is the violation of the statute. The elements of negligence per se are the following. The defendant violated a statute. The statute in question is a safety statute. The defendant's acts and/or omissions cause this type of harm that the statute was intended to prevent, and that the plaintiff is a member of the statute's protected class. The plaintiff in this case has the burden of proof, and in order to meet this burden, they needed to have a preponderance of evidence. So the plaintiff, to be clear, needed to prove the following 4 things. First, they had to prove to you that Peony Estates violated a statute. Secondly, that statute violated was a safety statute. Third, that our act or omission of an act created the type of harm the statute was intended to prevent. And lastly, they had to prove that the plaintiff is a member of the statute's protected class. Let's discuss how the plaintiff failed to meet their burden of proof. They had to prove to you that Harper Martini was negligent in her running of Peony Estates. But you heard Blair Osborne say that she was never concerned about how the employees stored or managed the wine at Peony Estates. You also heard Ms. Osborne say that she was never concerned about her own health and safety when around Peony Estates employees. Secondly, you heard Dr. Renee Cannon tell you that Dr. Jimmy Kwan failed to adequately consider alcohol poisoning as a cause of Mr. Petrillo's death. Dr. Renee Cannon also told you that Mr. Petrillo exhibited all the symptoms of alcohol poisoning, which could have potentially led to respiratory arrest, meaning that there is not one conclusive answer to explain Mr. Petrillo's passing. Lastly, you heard Austin Lewis, an employee at Peony Estates, say that everything was moved from the bottling area for 48 hours following their pesticide spraying, stating that none of the pesticides could have contaminated Peony Estates wine production. And this also included the bottle of Cara wine. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, based on the testimonies we have heard today, could anyone tell you the location of the Cara bottle of wine? No, they couldn't. Could anyone tell you the location of the pesticides? No, they couldn't. Could anyone show you sufficient proof that Harper Martini was negligent in her running of Peony Estates? No, they couldn't. And they couldn't because they have provided you, the jury, with unanswered questions. They can't tell you the answers to these questions because they don't know. They don't know where the Cara bottle was. They don't know where the pesticides were. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, they don't have proof. The plaintiff called 3 witnesses, and not a single one could tell you the location of the bottle or the location of the pesticides. Not a single witness that you heard today could lay a foundation of sufficient proof to justify Harper Martini's negligence in running Peony Estates. We ask you again to consider the following 3 questions. Where's the bottle? Where's the pesticides? Where's the proof? Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we ask you to consider the facts of the case and to find Harper Martini and Peony Estates not liable for negligence per se. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a rebuttal from plaintiff?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead when you're ready.
Your Honor, members of the jury, the defense has asked 3 questions. Where's the bottle? Where's the pesticide? And where's the proof? Well, multiple witnesses throughout the duration of this trial have found the bottle of Cara wine to be sitting right next to the pesticide in the bottling area. And then people from the defense's side and from the plaintiff's side as well. The defense also asked, where is the proof? The proof comes from all the testimony heard from every single witness throughout the case today. They would have you believe that we did not sufficiently prove the facts of the case. However, as I can repeat from earlier, Peony Estates violated numerous statutes that were meant to protect the public, and the violation of these statutes directly caused the harm that the statutes were intended to prevent. And lastly, that Genesis Petrillo was a member of the statute's protected class because that was previously stipulated, but also because she was a customer of Peony Estates and was using Peony Estates venue for his wedding and for other occasions as well. Your Honor, members of the jury, the defense is they're just scrambling for straws at this point in time. They do not have, sorry, I just lost my spot. They do not want us to show you our evidence and get it admitted into court. No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we'll take a few minutes to finish our ballots, and then we'll come back and give comments and answer any questions to the extent you guys have any. So that's all. I will let the scoring judge go ahead and introduce herself before I go, because you're probably all sick of me at this point. Okay, see you soon.
Thank you.
And just let me know when you're all submitted, Kristen.
Okay, ready.
Awesome. Well, hi, everyone. Congratulations. My name is Dariah McAllister. I competed with my trial for some time. It was one of my favorite activities. I competed with Miami for 3 years. I was All-American 2014 as well as national champion. So an amazing experience. I was just telling the last round, I don't do too much in the mock trial world these days. Ironically, you would expect me to be one of the people who continued on. But law wasn't really my passion. I currently work for a startup here in Cleveland. So I would definitely recommend cherish this time. There is no other experience like traveling with your teammates, even though I know we're in this weird time of COVID, but hopefully everything gets back to normal. And so, again, I think that this experience is truly priceless. I miss my teammates so much. I miss the experience so much. And even though my career is not in law, the tools that you gain are absolutely valuable regardless of the career you're going in. So if you love mock trial, stick around, because truly I just loved it to be around. I thought that at one point I wanted to go into law, but I encourage everyone, continue on. You all were so great. I feel like at this point in the season, because things are bound to change, whether that's teams and facts and data, I just tried to focus, and I'm going to just go over very briefly just stylistic things maybe, because I feel like regardless of those factual changes and roster changes, maybe these will be some things that you all can hold on to. So I would say overall, let's give us more. And again, please take everything with a grain of salt, because I absolutely understand it's only October. And of course, your coaches know best. I would echo that too. But at this point, just give us more. I wanted more drama across the board, whether it was attorneys at some point or witnesses. Give us more, because even though this is law and technically a court proceeding, it's also drama. This is also your stage. So give us that. I saw some really good attorney witness exchanges. So lovely. Just a quick shout out again. Everyone was amazing. Can't echo that enough. But some really good witness exchanges. Colton and Wagner. I thought Austin, character who played Austin, so I know I don't have you all's first name. And Lexi, great witness exchange. My notes are a bit all over the place. And Riley / Lauren and Cam, good witness exchange as well. I thought Cam, you did a good job at matching tone, and that you actually shined in your direct. So many little things I can go over. I don't want to take up too much time. I always like to give a shout out to favorite character witness, because again, that was my thing, and I know sometimes witnesses don't get as much focus. So Austin, character who played Austin, great. I love the character, the energy. Again, I think at this point, as early as it is, sometimes it's hard to get those stylistic things in. We're just getting a grasp of all the facts and the important objections that are going to come into play. So for this early on, great job for Austin, great job for just some people that stuck out to me. Riley, I thought you were likable. Bit more pop, but I thought you were very likable. Experts, I think experts are hard characters to play. So kudos to Dr. Cannon, Dr. Renee. I thought that for an expert again, this early on, I liked you. Good energy. Good job at remaining calm during cross. Overall, attorneys, great. I really like some of the objection battles and some of the objection exchanges that went on. So again, thank you all for allowing me to judge. I wish both teams best of luck in the rest of the season. Best of luck with the rest of the school year, because you all are troopers, even for just with everything going on. I mean, I couldn't imagine doing a mock trial competition virtually in this fashion. I know sometimes we have some scrimmages like that, but so again, kudos to everyone. Best of luck.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I'll talk for a little bit now. Can you guys hear me? Okay, thanks. Well, this was a pleasure. Thank you so much. Like I said, my name is Kristen. I started doing mock trial in high school. I competed, coached, judged, all combined, going on my 10th or 11th year. In undergrad, I competed with NIU, Northern Illinois University. And now I'm kind of part-time coaching for them again. I went to law school at Northwestern. I just graduated this year and just took the bar, so I can't quite call myself an attorney yet, but almost, hopefully, fingers crossed. You guys did great. I think you are in pretty good shape for October. You should feel okay. I'll make a few general comments and a few specific comments. First, just ignore my confusion about the improper impeachment objection. I just don't know about that, and I think that's because of my own experiences with my undergrad coach. There was some confusion, but at least on my part, that didn't affect anybody's scores. So if I was totally wrong about that, sorry, my bad. Okay. Objections in general, though, make sure that you are responding to the objection that is being made. Very important. Also, make sure that you're listening to the ruling on the objection. Once or twice, the attorney would go on and ask the same offending question that I sustained an objection on. So don't want to do that. Witnesses, a general comment. Okay, first I have to sneak in one specific compliment. Austin Lewis, you were so believable and so likable and so enjoyable to watch. It was absolutely wonderful. You just embodied the character. I thought you were the actual person, and that is so important. Thank you. That was a pleasure to watch.
Thank you so much.
Oh yeah, no problem. Everyone else. So I think you're allowed to read like from a script with this new format. But people can tell when you're reading, and it just doesn't, it's really boring to listen to, and nobody wants to listen to it. So try not to read as you know, if you don't have to, then don't. And make an effort to be believable. I know that's stupid general advice, and of course you're going to try to do that anyway, but just an area for improvement, I think. Okay, some specific comments. Defense attorneys across the board, I thought you all have just really pleasant tones, nice to listen to. Lexi, in your closing, it's a really advanced thing you're doing where you're attacking on evidence that isn't there. Very, very good job on that. That's something I didn't start doing until I was competing in law school. So very well done for that. That's a persuasive technique to use in your closing. Abigail, love your style. You generate like a sort of confidence when you're just doing everything. So you're doing great.
Thank you.
And then, yes, and then the witness, Riley, sorry, I don't have your real name. I also thought you were very likable, and you've got great hair, so that was pleasant to look at. All right.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem. And, you know, take all my comments with a grain of salt. It was great to watch you guys, and best of luck in the future.
Thank y'all both for judging. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.